Kristi Louise Johnson, known to everyone as Kristi, was born on February 27, 1981, in Los Gatos, California. Her family was living in South America at the time, but her mom had chosen to return to the same hospital where Kristi's older brother Derek was born, under the care of the same doctor. After just a few days, Kristi came home from the hospital to her grandparents' house nearby. She was just 6 weeks old when she got her passport and traveled with her mom and brother back to their home in South America. Not long after that, the family moved back to California, where Kristi's early childhood was filled with sunshine, poolside play, ballet lessons, beach days, swim meets, and birthday parties. It was a happy, active start for a little girl full of joy. When her dad got a business opportunity in Michigan, the family relocated to Holland, near Lake Michigan. That brought snowy winters, sledding, skiing, and tulip festivals in the spring. Kristi took to it all: sports, the arts, friendships. Eventually, her parents' marriage came to an end, and Kristi and Derek moved with their mom to a little lakeside town called Saugatuck, just up the road from where their dad still lived. That chapter of her life was filled with more outdoor adventures. Growing up in a summer tourist town meant Kristi started working young, scooping ice cream, helping out in local shops, waiting tables. She was motivated, always moving towards something. After high school, she headed to Western Michigan University, joined Sigma Kappa, and began college life. But there was always this pull in her heart to get back to California, the place where her story began. So after her freshman year, Kristi made the leap. She moved back to California to continue college and pursue something bigger. Her mom followed shortly after, once both kids had left the nest. Kristi was 21, full of dreams, and living in Los Angeles, chasing a future she was excited to build. On the afternoon of February 15, 2003, Kristi was at the Century City Mall when she was approached by a man named Victor Paleologos. He told her he was a filmmaker and that he was casting a new James Bond movie. They were looking for a fresh face to play the next Bond girl, he said, and Kristi had the look. She believed him. She went to the audition. She never came home. When Kristi didn't show up for work the next day, her mom immediately knew something was wrong and reported her missing. Days passed, then weeks, and then in March, hikers in the Hollywood Hills found a body at the bottom of a ravine. Her hands and ankles were bound, and she'd been strangled. A hibiscus tattoo on her lower back confirmed what nobody wanted to believe. It was Kristi. The investigation uncovered a deeply disturbing pattern. This wasn't the first time Paleologos had lured a woman using a fake audition. Back in 1998, he tried the same trick, offering a role in a Bond film, then attempted to sexually assault the woman. He was convicted and served 5 years in prison. He was released on January 20, 2003. Kristi was murdered just 26 days later. After her death, several women came forward with chillingly similar stories. A man posing as a casting agent approached them with promises of fame and film roles. It was always the same script, the same setup. It was calculated, intentional. The whole setup was hauntingly similar to the way serial killer Rodney Alcala operated decades earlier, luring women with promises of modeling or acting opportunities. Paleologos may not be as widely known, but his methods were just as manipulative and just as dangerous. Eventually, he was arrested, initially in connection with another incident, but the evidence surrounding Kristi's case grew too strong to ignore. What made it even more horrifying was how methodical it all was. He had a routine, he knew what he was doing, and he knew how to make people trust him. Facing overwhelming evidence, he took a plea deal in 2006, avoiding the death penalty and receiving a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Victor Lawrence Paleologos is a manipulative predator who's proven more than once how dangerous he is. He doesn't deserve freedom. He doesn't deserve another chance. But incredibly, he's up for parole again. His next hearing is scheduled for October 8, 2025 at 10:30 a.m. Kristi deserved so much more. She was just 21, bright, loving, and full of potential. She believed in the goodness of people. She trusted someone who said he would help her reach her dreams, and he stole everything from her. If you'd like to help make sure Paleo Loga stays exactly where he belongs, behind bars, please visit justiceforkristi.org. There are simple, free ways to get involved and help keep this man from ever hurting another person again. Kristi's story should have ended very differently, and it's on all of us to make sure her voice still matters. Marcus Leon M.J. Daniels Jr. was born on December 10, 2002, in Lucedale, Mississippi. He was the firstborn child of Marcus Daniels Sr. and Adrienne Jackson, and from the very beginning, MJ had this energy that just drew people in. Whether it was his bright, contagious smile or his natural charisma, you couldn't help but feel better in his presence. MJ grew up loving sports. Football was his first passion, but he also excelled at baseball and basketball. He enjoyed fishing, hunting, traveling, dancing, and even goofing around trying to sing. He wasn't just athletic, he was magnetic. Friends and family say there was never a dull moment when MJ was around. He had a deep love for his family and made time for those closest to him. At George County High School, MJ was a standout. He was Mr. George County High School in 2021 and a true hometown hero. With offers pouring in for both football and baseball, MJ ultimately chose to play football at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, from 2021 to 2022. In 2023, he transferred to the University of Southern Mississippi, ready for a fresh chapter and eager to shine on the field as a Golden Eagle. He was a defensive back heading into his senior season with a bright future ahead. Off the field, MJ worked at the Tri-State Maritime Services and lived at the Ivy Row Apartments in Hattiesburg. Life was lining up for him. He had plans, he had momentum, and he had people cheering him on. But all of that came to a tragic, violent end on June 11, 2024. That afternoon, MJ was sitting in his black Dodge Challenger outside his apartment complex when someone called 911 to report gunshots. First responders arrived to find MJ slumped in the driver's seat, dead from a single gunshot wound to the back of his head near his neck. It was a brutal and calculated execution. Investigators found a 9mm shell casing near the passenger side of the vehicle and noted 2 bullet holes, one on the passenger side and one on the driver's side. The driver's side bullet didn't penetrate the car. Fingerprints were lifted from the vehicle's exterior, including prints belonging to Shamir Green. At least 3 witnesses were on the scene, though their names haven't been made public. One of them, a woman walking her dog, said she noticed 4 males following her moments before the shooting. She grew nervous and called her roommate as she walked back toward her unit. When she neared the door, the group turned and walked away. 2 days later, 3 suspects, Orlando May, Alan Marcus Gardner, and Shamir Green, were arrested. May and Green were pulled over near Hattiesburg High School in what turned out to be a stolen vehicle. They fled from police on foot, but were quickly apprehended. Officers found a .38 caliber handgun inside the car. A 4th suspect, 17-year-old Natavion Shaw, was arrested 9 days later. Each of the suspects faced serious charges. Orlando May, believed to be the shooter, was eventually convicted of capital murder. He was also found guilty of conspiracy to commit armed robbery, taking possession of a motor vehicle, possession of a stolen firearm, and felony eluding police. The courtroom atmosphere was intense. MJ's family sat in heavy silence as the verdict was read. Some cried, others quietly celebrated justice. May, on the other hand, showed no emotion. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for capital murder. He also received 20 years for conspiracy to commit armed robbery and 10 years for the stolen vehicle charge. Those sentences will run concurrently. The others involved all took plea deals. Gardner and Green, 18 and 17 at the time, pleaded guilty in February 2025 to first-degree murder. Gardner also admitted to conspiracy to commit armed robbery. In exchange for their pleas, other charges were dropped. Earlier in October 2024, Shaw had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Natavion Shaw, Alan Gardner, and Samir Green, the 3 co-defendants, were sentenced in July 2025. Each teen was sentenced to 40 years in prison, and will be eligible for parole after 20 years. MJ had his entire life ahead of him, a promising football career, a supportive family, a whole future to build. Instead, that promise was stolen by senseless violence. What's left now is the memory of a young man who gave so much to those around him and a grieving family fighting to keep his legacy alive. Morgan Dana Harrington was born on July 24, 1989, in Charlottesville, Virginia. She was smart, driven, and full of personality. By the time she was 20, Morgan was a junior at Virginia Tech, studying education and planning to become a teacher. She worked over the summer at the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine alongside her father, Dr. Daniel Harrington, and those who knew her described her as kind-hearted, spirited, and unforgettable. She had this booming, joyful laugh that made people smile. Morgan left an impact everywhere she went. On October 17, 2009, she was at the John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville for a Metallica concert. She was excited for weeks, maybe months. Her mom said she'd posted the tickets on the fridge 6 months earlier and had tried on multiple outfits that day before settling on a black Pantera shirt and a crystal necklace. That night, Morgan left her friends during the concert to use the restroom, but she never came back. At some point, she called her friends and said she was outside and couldn't get back in because of the arena's strict no re-entry policy. She told them not to worry, she'd find a ride home. Why she left the building in the first place is still a mystery. The arena had bathrooms inside, but for whatever reason, she ended up outside. Witnesses later spotted someone matching her description walking alone near the Copley Road Bridge, about a mile from the arena. The next morning, Morgan's purse, ID, and cell phone were found in a parking lot near the arena, but Morgan was gone. 3 months later, on January 26, 2010, her remains were found in a hayfield on Anchorage Farm in Albemarle County, about 10 miles from the arena. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. The discovery shattered her family, who had held out hope and led massive search efforts. Her death left an entire community shaken. For years, there were no answers. Then, in September 2014, another young woman disappeared in Charlottesville, 18-year-old University of Virginia student Hannah Graham. Like Morgan, she vanished after a night out. Surveillance footage captured Hannah walking unsteadily down the street, and a man was seen with his arm around her, later identified as Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. It didn't take long for police to connect Matthew to the case. He was a patient technician at the UVA Medical Center and had a troubling history. Investigators tracked him down on a beach in Galveston, Texas, and arrested him. A few weeks later, Hannah's remains were found on an abandoned property just 12 miles from where Morgan's body had been discovered. Matthew's arrest turned out to be the break Morgan's case desperately needed. DNA recovered from her body matched DNA from an unsolved 2005 sexual assault and attempted murder case in Fairfax, Virginia. That same DNA now linked Jesse Matthew to all 3 crimes: Fairfax, Morgan, and Hannah. In September 2015, nearly 6 years after Morgan's murder, a grand jury indicted Matthew on charges of first-degree murder and abduction with intent to defile in her case. On March 2, 2016, he pleaded guilty to the murders of both Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham. In exchange for his guilty plea, he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole, waiving all rights to appeal. By then, he had already entered an Alford plea in the 2005 Fairfax case, meaning he didn't admit guilt but acknowledged that prosecutors had enough evidence to convict him. That alone had earned him 3 life sentences. What's more disturbing is that Matthew had been accused of sexual assaults at Liberty University and Christopher Newport University in 2002 and 2003, but the women didn't pursue charges at the time. So he kept slipping through the cracks, working jobs, even driving a taxi, until he was hired at a hospital. He was hiding in plain sight for years. In court, Morgan's parents came face to face with the man they always believed was responsible for their daughter's death. Her father told reporters, He needs to know that justice is coming, and it did. Today, Morgan's legacy lives on through the Morgan-Dana Harrington Memorial Scholarship Fund at the Virginia Tech Carroll School of Medicine. Each year, the Docs for Morgan basketball game brings together physicians and students in her honor, raising money for future medical students while keeping her memory alive. It's not just about what was lost. It's about carrying forward the love and passion Morgan gave to the world. Sarah Everard was born in 1987 in Surrey, England, and spent much of her childhood in York. She went to Fulford School, and from early on she stood out for being thoughtful, kind, and full of quiet determination. In 2005, she began studying human geography at Durham University and graduated 3 years later from St. Cuthbert's Society. By the time she was 33, Sarah was living in Brixton Hill, South London, working as a marketing executive for a digital media agency. She had friends who adored her, a supportive family, and a future filled with possibility. But that future was stolen from her on the night of March 3, 2021. Sarah had been visiting a friend near Clapham Junction and left around 9 p.m. to walk home, which would have taken roughly 50 minutes. She wore bright clothing, stuck to the main roads, and followed all the safety advice women are given. She walked along the A205 South Circular Road, across the Common en route to her Brixton Hill home. She spoke to her boyfriend on her phone for about 15 minutes and agreed to meet him the next day. At 9:28, she was seen on doorbell camera footage on Pointers Road, and 4 minutes later on the dash cam of a passing police car. Sadly, she never made it home. As she walked along the A205 Pointers Road, she was approached by Wayne Cousins, a Metropolitan police officer. He was 48 years old, married with 2 children, and worked in the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command. That night, he was off duty and driving a rental car he'd booked days earlier. He'd also purchased self-adhesive film, marketed as a carpet protector, believed to be part of his plan. Cousins used his warrant card and handcuffs to stage a fake arrest. He told Sarah she was being detained for violating COVID-19 restrictions. A couple driving by even witnessed the interaction and assumed it was a legitimate arrest. It took less than 5 minutes for Cousins to handcuff Sarah, force her into the car, and drive away. He took her 80 miles to Kent, where he transferred her to his own vehicle. In a remote area near Dover, he sexually assaulted and strangled her using his police-issued belt. By 2:30 a.m., he was seen at a service station buying drinks. Later that day, he returned to where he'd left Sarah's body. He purchased gas and a refrigerator. As if he hadn't done enough evil deeds, he then decided to burn her remains and placed what was left into green rubble bags, which he dumped in a pond at Hode's Wood, just 130 meters from the land he owned. While the country searched for Sarah, Cousins went on about his life like nothing had happened. He called a vet about his dog, spent time with his kids, and even brought his family to the same woods where he had burned her body. On March 8th, the day he was due back at work, Cousins called in sick. Detectives had tracked a white Vauxhall Crossland, captured on CCTV near where Sarah was last seen, back to a rental car company. That car had been hired by Wayne Cousins. From there, investigators used phone data, automatic number plate recognition, and security footage to trace his movements from London to Kent. His phone and Sarah's had connected to the same cell towers at critical times, and GPS data showed him traveling to areas later identified as the locations where her remains were found. As the evidence piled up, Cousins quickly became their prime suspect. In his first interview, Cousins lied. He claimed he was being blackmailed by a gang after underpaying a sex worker and that he handed Sarah over to 3 men in a van.
Okay, well, I am in financial, and I've been lent on by, I don't know who they are. They're a group, a gang, whatever. And they told me, right, I need to go and pick up girls and give them to them. So, massive happening. And it then came through that they're going to harm my family, take them away, and they'll use them instead. At that point, I had no option to try and find somebody. So I don't. There's a couple of names. I was told a place to take her. That's it. That is all I know to this group of people.
But the evidence, CCTV, phone data, and vehicle tracking told the truth, and on March 10th, police found Sarah's burned remains in Kent. Dental records confirmed her identity. A post-mortem found she died from compression of the neck. That same day, Cousins was charged with murder. As the investigation continued, the public learned Sarah hadn't been targeted. Cousins didn't know her. Prosecutors said he had been hunting for a victim, driving into London in the weeks before the attack with the intent to kidnap, sexually assault, and murder a woman. It was all planned. And what made it worse was that there had been warning signs. Cousins had exposed himself to women at least 3 times before the murder. One incident happened in 2015 and was reported to Kent police. 2 more occurred just days before Sarah's murder at a South London fast food drive-thru. He used his own car, his license plate was visible, and still nothing was done. Despite multiple reports, Cousins remained on duty, armed and trusted. On March 12th, he was formally charged with kidnap and murder. He eventually pled guilty to all charges. On September 30th, 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In court, Sarah's family delivered emotional impact statements. Her father, Jeremy, demanded that Cousins look him in the eye. "You murdered our daughter and forever broke the heart of our family," he said. Her mother, Susan, told the court, "Burning her body was the final insult. You burned our lives." Sarah's murder sparked a nationwide reckoning. Candlelight vigils were held across the UK. Women shared stories of harassment and fear. The phrase, "she was just walking home," became a call for change. And it wasn't just about Cousins. It was about a broken system. The Metropolitan Police faced intense scrutiny. The Independent Office for Police Conduct launched investigations. In 2022, the government appointed Dame Eilish Angiolini to lead a public inquiry into Cousins' policing career. When the first part of the report was released in 2024, it was damning. Both Kent Police and the Met had failed to act on multiple red flags. His pattern of indecent exposure and disturbing behavior should have disqualified him from the force. The conclusion was devastating. Sarah's murder was preventable. In response, the Met committed to reform. They appointed Baroness Casey to review culture and standards. A new action plan prioritized arresting predatory offenders. Specialist units were expanded. Hundreds of new officers were deployed in public areas. Allegations of abuse and misconduct by police officers were re-examined, and vetting procedures were overhauled. The very unit Cousins had worked in, the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, was put under full review. They also introduced new safety measures. If someone is approached by a lone, plainclothes officer, that officer is now expected to offer live verification through a police video call, or the person can call 999 directly to confirm their identity. But the revelations didn't stop. In 2024, Wayne Cousins was sentenced to 19 additional months in prison for 3 indecent exposure incidents he committed before Sarah's murder. One involved him stepping into the path of a female cyclist while naked and masturbating in a wooded area. Another involved him exposing himself to fast food workers twice in the days just before abducting Sarah, and still no one stopped him. 2 officers are now facing misconduct hearings over how they handled those reports, and the Met is still reckoning with the fallout from other scandals, most notably former officer David Carrick, who admitted to 49 offenses, including 24 sexual assaults over nearly 2 decades. He, too, wore a badge and used his position to prey on women. A report from late 2023 found that misconduct complaints, many filed by fellow officers or family, took more than a year on average to resolve. That slow system of accountability left dangerous men in uniform. Sarah Everard's murder wasn't just a horrific crime, It was a flashing warning light that something was deeply wrong in British policing, but her story has driven change, and her name will never be forgotten. Susan Elizabeth Mauldin was 65 years old and living in Fleming Island, Florida. She was a widow, independent, smart, and not someone who backed down when she was being taken advantage of. And in the fall of 2019, something was very wrong. She'd paid $12,000 to a contractor named Corey Benderum to remodel her bathroom. But months passed, and the bathroom wasn't just incomplete, it had been gutted and left in ruins. Benderum kept stringing her along with excuse after excuse. Eventually, Susan had enough. A close friend later told investigators that Susan was done waiting. She was going to confront him, demand her money back, and if he didn't cooperate, she'd go to the police and take legal action. She meant it. On the morning of October 24th, 2019, the day after Susan was supposed to give him that ultimatum, Benderum pulled into a Home Depot around 7 a.m. Surveillance cameras caught him buying 2 60-pound bags of quick-drying concrete and a pack of heavy-duty demo bags. After that, he drove into Susan's neighborhood and called her twice. Just before 8:30 a.m., a school bus camera caught his white truck backed into her driveway. Later, Benderum told police he'd just stopped by to pick up tools and that he gave Susan a check for $1,200. But investigators found the account he used didn't even have enough funds to cover the check. And by 8:45, Benderum had shut off his location-sharing app and was on his way to the Rosemary Hill Waste Management Facility. There, he dumped roughly 300 pounds of material. The next day, when Susan didn't respond to text or calls, a friend went to check on her. She wasn't home, and something felt off. Police were called. Inside the house, officers found signs of a struggle, blood on a lampshade, more on the living room floor, and even more in the kitchen. Susan was nowhere to be found. Benderum immediately became a person of interest. In December, he was arrested, though not for Susan's disappearance, at least not yet. He was booked in Jacksonville on a forgery charge and held on $50,000 bond. By that time, investigators had already noticed the deep scratches on his arms and hands. A cadaver dog alerted to the smell of decomposition coming from a tool bag in his storage unit, one he'd previously used at Susan's home. Then came a chilling confession from a jailhouse informant. Benderum admitted to choking and hitting a client during an argument about payment. "She started getting loud," the informant recalled him saying, "and I was trying to shut her up." That led to a massive, coordinated search in January 2020 at the Chesser Island landfill in Folkston, Georgia, where trash from the Rosemary Hill facility was sent. The FBI, Clay County Sheriff's Office, and state prosecutors mobilized a large-scale recovery effort. Around 70 to 90 personnel worked 12-hour shifts daily in brutal conditions, hot, filthy, dangerous. They sifted through more than 7,000 tons of garbage. "This is like searching for a needle in a haystack," said State Attorney Melissa Nelson. FBI Special Agent Brian Rigucci remembered standing at the edge of the landfill and quietly saying, "Susan, where are you? Help us find you." On January 29th, after 9 grueling days, they did. A Clay County corrections officer spotted a portion of a human skull with hair still attached. More remains were found the next day. Dental records confirmed what no one wanted to believe. It was Susan Mauldin. Dr. Edmund Donahue, the forensic pathologist, determined she'd been beaten and strangled. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. The fractured bone in her neck showed she'd also been strangled. Benderum was formally charged with Susan's murder on March 3, 2020. At trial, prosecutors laid out exactly what happened. Benderum knew she was going to demand her money. He killed her inside her home, placed her body in those contractor bags, and dumped her at the landfill, discarded like trash. During opening statements, Assistant State Attorney Ashley Terry said he tossed her out like the garbage he thought she was. It was a line that stuck and haunted everyone who heard it. The defense tried to argue that Benderum's actions were shaped by drug addiction, mental illness, and even football-related brain trauma. They brought in doctors to talk about his history of concussions, family mental health, and his use of cocaine to self-medicate. but the jury wasn't buying it. On October 14, 2024, nearly 5 years after Susan's murder, Corey Benderham was found guilty of first-degree murder, burglary during a battery, and tampering with evidence. 2 days later, the jury recommended life in prison without parole, sparing him the death penalty by just one vote. His attorney has since filed a motion for a new trial. Whether or not that goes anywhere, the damage is already done. Susan's gone. She was murdered in her own home over a bathroom remodel that was never even started by someone she'd trusted to do a job. It's the kind of senseless violence that leaves you stunned. What stands out the most isn't just the horror of what happened, it's how many people stepped up when she couldn't. Friends who raised the alarm, investigators who refused to give up, dozens of people out in the Georgia heat digging through tons of garbage because they believed Susan deserved to be found. She didn't have close family around her at the time, but in the end, she had a whole team of strangers who made sure she wasn't just another missing person, another cold case. They brought her home, and they brought her killer to justice.